Check out these Nike Trainer 1s from 2010. These shoes are so creative. They're meant to look like a vintage Nike shoebox. And actually, when pictures of these shoes first surfaced on the internet, Nike made us believe that they were going to come in a vintage Nike shoebox. But they didn't. They came in this plain orange box, but that's okay. The shoes are still amazing. They retailed for $110 and sold out right away. The color of the upper is safety orange and neutral gray, and I always get really excited whenever there's a pair of Nikes in bright orange because orange is the color of Nike. This particular pair is so nostalgic though. When you look at it, you can't help but remember those vintage Nike shoe boxes, and I wish the shoes would have come with them. But that's okay because a few years earlier in 2007, I actually got a vintage style Nike shoebox. Let's move this out of the way and bring these shoes to life. In the ShoeZeum, all of the shoes were brought to life with toys and props that were the inspiration behind the shoes. And really what I wanted to do was make it so anybody could walk through the ShoeZeum and clearly see what the inspiration was behind the shoes, not just big time sneakerheads. So a shoe like this really needed that vintage style box so that when somebody looked at the shoe, they were like, oh, I get it. I got this box at Nike Town, Beverly Hills. In 2007, Nike retroed a lot of their waffles and early running shoes, and they decked the store out with these vintage boxes, which actually wasn't accurate because these boxes are much more like the boxes of shoes from the 80s, not shoes from the 70s, which were the waffles and the vintage runners that were being retroed at the time. But that didn't matter to me. I saw the box, it was so nostalgic, I was all over it. So you can imagine a few years later when Nike released this pair of Trainer 1s that looked like the box, I was even more all over it. So the Nike Air Trainer 1 was designed by Tinker Hatfield. It came out in 1987 and it's the first cross-training shoe ever. Tinker literally created his own category of shoes by coming up with a shoe that could be used for multiple sports. 23 years later, in 2010, Nike released this Trainer 1, an updated version of that shoe. And let's have a look at it. I love the details on this pair of kicks. So you'll notice that the upper is that bright safety orange, but when you look close at it, you'll see these flywire cables. Flywire first showed up on Hyperdunks and Lunar Racers in 2008. It was inspired by suspension cable bridges, and basically it's a way to make the upper of the shoe very lightweight but also very strong. So here you have Flywire infused on a trainer. Then when you look down below at the midsole, you'll see a visible Max Air. The original Air Trainer 1 did not have visible air on it, even though it was released as part of a 3-pack of shoes with the first Air Max and the Air Safari. And of course that first Air Max was the first shoe with visible air on it. Anyway, this Trainer 1 does have visible air, which it's kind of curious that Nike called this shoe the Nike Trainer 1 instead of the Nike Air Trainer 1, considering the fact that this shoe does feature visible air, and it's just weird. Anyway, back to this pair of kicks. We got to look at the back here. You got to love that iconic Nike Air on there. We love it when our Jordans say this, but of course Air Jordans weren't the only shoes that had Nike Air on the back. And then another cool detail is actually right here on the tongue, that checkered pattern. That's sort of like the challenge courts that John McEnroe wore before he started wearing the trainer. Before the Trainer 1, McEnroe wore a whole bunch of shoes that were called the challenge court. Then the Trainer 1, and then a few years later, Agassi wore Tech Challenges, which sort of made things confusing. But the challenge courts that were originally worn by McEnroe had this checkered logo on here, so it sort of pays homage to the first athlete that made the Air Trainer 1 famous. When you look at the back part of this shoe, it really does resemble that earlier Air Trainer 1. It's just the rest of the shoe has really been modernized and updated. The toe box too does resemble that Air Trainer 1, but when you look at them side by side, this is really a modernized, updated version with the Flywire upper with the visible air, meant to take you back in time to the era when Nike boxes looked just like this.